Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Napoleon 2023 film. This is a current movie that's out in movie theaters. I saw the movie yesterday, and I thought it was a terrible movie. But I think that the topic was very important, the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. Back in 2008, I read a biography of him, a very long biography of Napoleon. The title is Napoleon by Emil Ludwig, came out in 1926, and it was one of the best books I've ever read. I thought it was incredible, and based on reading this book, Napoleon seemed to be a genius. Of course, what's important to remember about his life is during the 1700s, you had the Enlightenment in Europe. And that was an intellectual movement trying to bring progress to the world, education, a better life for people, learning, better government, and people questioning the old ways. And a lot of those types of thinkings played a role in the American Revolution coming, in which the American colonies in North America fought for independence against Great Britain and established a government without a king. At that time, all of the countries of Europe had royal families. And in the United States, the Americans had a government without a king, a government which would be, and the people could have a say in who would be their representatives. And so that was in 1776. The words of the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. Those were really Enlightenment ideas. And then not long after that, 1789, the French Revolution broke out, in which the French king and his wife, King Louis and his wife, Marie Antoinette, were arrested, and this new government took over. And there were these ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, wonderful ideals, but the French Revolution turned into a disaster, primarily because it became atheist and had a war on Christianity and tried to destroy religion in France. And France was primarily a Catholic Christian country, and they had all these priests and nuns who were either arrested or killed or went into exile. So if you become atheistic, I think then it's a hopeless situation because God is so important. God's the source of goodness. And of course there was corruption in the Catholic Church, but there still were good priests and nuns. And the message of Jesus Christ was still important, of loving God and loving each other. Now, so anyway, the French Revolution came, and Napoleon was an early supporter. And eventually, years later, during his lifetime, he was really trying to bring good government to all of Europe. He was a military leader, transitioned to political leader, and was trying to bring good government to Europe and create a United States of Europe. Now, he was really at war with not only the kings and royal families of Europe, but also the big bankers who were behind them. So it was France, wars that he was fighting, France against England, Russia, Austria, Spain, and other countries. Islands played an important role in his life. He was from the island of Corsica, a French island in the Mediterranean. And in his first exile, he was on the Italian island of Elba, and later he was on the British island of St. Helena the last years of his life, 1,000 miles off the coast of Central Africa. I thought his last 6 years of his life were the best because he was very stoic and very noble, and I thought, based on reading this book. Napoleon Bonaparte was, he did believe in democracy, but he had to really be a dictator to bring good government to France and Europe. He talked about just losses in war, death in war. He was very self-confident, had a lot of energy and imagination, a great man, inspirational. And I felt empowered as I read that biography, Napoleon by Emil Ludwig, 1926. So Napoleon was born in 1769 in Corsica, a French island. He died in 1821 in St. Helena. He died at age 51. You could say he died of old age because of everything he'd been through, but actually there's some believe that he was poisoned by the British. He was a British prisoner. He was a very decisive man and forgiving. Of course, his wife Josephine, she was the love of his life. They had problems in their marriage. Now, actually, on St. Helena, he wrote his memoirs his account of his life, and they were published. They became the single best-selling book of the 19th century. There's there's many biographies and books about Napoleon, and the one that I have not read but looks really good, which I would like to read, is called Napoleon: A Life by Andrew Roberts, 2015, 976 pages. And the main, or the one thing that I got off reading the reviews and information about this book is that the main point of Napoleon's life wasn't that he was a military leader or a warrior. He was a warrior for sure, but that he was working to bring good government to Europe. And there's a quote by Andrew Roberts, quote, "The ideas that underpin our modern world, meritocracy, equality before the law, property rights, religious toleration, modern secular education, sound finances, and so on, were championed, consolidated, codified, and geographically extended by Napoleon." Well, that's an incredible quote. Meritocracy, meaning you have your position is based on ability and merit, not based on birth in a family. Equality before the law, we take that for granted now. Property rights, religious toleration, so important. He received during his career, he was in Egypt for a time, and he respected Islam and the culture of the Egyptians. So important. And another quote by Andrew Roberts. "Napoleon Bonaparte taught ordinary people that they could make history, and convinced his followers they were taking part in an adventure, a pageant, an experiment, an epic, whose splendor would draw the attention of posterity for centuries to come." Yeah, so he was an inspiring leader, and that was a part of his success. You didn't see that at all in the movie, and this quote about him bringing good government, that's not in the movie as well. Now, there's another book that I have read, Napoleon versus the Old and New World Orders by M.S. King, 2016. It's online. You can read it for free. And one of his themes of the book is that Napoleon had a vision of good government in a time when there was really oppressive government. We still, of course, have oppressive governments today. That's why this quest of Napoleon continues. There's some really good quotes that are relevant to this, because Napoleon was fighting the kings of Europe, but also the bankers. There's a quote by Mayer Amschel Rothschild, quote, "Let me issue and control the nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws." Forbes magazine called Mayer Amschel Rothschild the founding father of international finance. So now here's a quote by Werner Sombart. "There is but one power in Europe, and that is Rothschild." Thomas Jefferson, the author of the U.S. Declaration of Independence and the third U.S. president, quote, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies." Benjamin Disraeli, British Prime Minister, said, quote, "Rothschild is the lord and master of the money markets of the world, and virtually lord and master of everything else." Now there's another quote by another Rothschild, Baron Nathan Rothschild. "I care not what puppet is placed on the throne of England to rule the empire. The man that controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the money supply." Quote by Frederick Morton, quote, "The Rothschilds make loans to nations and reap huge profits. The wealth of the Rothschilds consists of the bankruptcy of nations." Yeah, the bankers, the Rothschilds, they were making big money, lending to governments and promoting war and making money from war. This is what's still on. This is why the topic of Napoleon is so important, in my opinion, because this struggle continues today. You could say that Napoleon failed. He failed it, and he was taken a prisoner. But that quote by this author was really good about how the ideas, Andrew Roberts' quote about good government, that he had brought these things. And of course, we are still struggling to implement them, because to have those things, you have to have good character in the people of the world. Now, in the movie, it starts off with the death of Marie Antoinette, which was pretty terrible. This queen, her husband, King Louis, had already had his head cut off, and then she got her head cut off in the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror. And it's a very sad scene with this crowd, jeering her, throwing vegetables at her. And then sometime later in the movie, the death of Robespierre, who was really this very evil guy, the leader of the Reign of Terror. In the movie, he's going to be arrested and executed, and he tries to commit suicide. And he sticks a gun, tries to kill himself, but the gun he doesn't succeed. He falls down, and the guy sticks his finger in the wound in his neck, and he says, "Oh, you missed." And Robespierre is like, because it's hurting him. He says, "Well, you're gonna live to have your head cut off." And then, of course, a big part of the movie is Napoleon and Josephine, and in the movie, it's very dysfunctional. I don't know how accurate. It's probably inaccurate, because I think the movie was anti-Napoleon, because the big bankers still rule the world, and he was their enemy. He fought a tough fight against these the powers that be. Not only the kings of Europe, but the bankers behind them. Now, in the movie, it shows him in Egypt. That's pretty cool. And then it shows the French firing up a cannon at the pyramid, hitting the top of the pyramid. And then really an interesting scene with Napoleon and this mummy, which it's taken out. The cover is removed, and he's staring at this, I don't know, this pharaoh. Maybe it was him in a past life. And then when he became the Emperor of France, 1804, in Notre Dame Cathedral, made famous by the novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where the Pope came, and then famously Napoleon placed the crown upon his own head. And then, of course, the disaster in Russia, where he invaded, that really is what destroyed Napoleon, because he lost so many men. And when they got into Moscow, and the Russians had to abandon Moscow, and it was the winter. It was early part of the winter, very severe Russian winter, and then the Russians had set fire to Moscow, and so Napoleon was shocked that they would just abandon their capital and then set it on fire. But the strategy worked, because then the French, there was no food and nowhere to stay, and it was lonely. And they started withdrawing back to France. It's really well depicted in Leo Tolstoy's novel War and Peace, and then vast majority of his army, he had like 600,000 guys, like 50,000 made it back because they died of cold and got sick, and that really led to him losing power because of that. And then he was exiled to Elba, and then there's the great scene when he decides to come back, and He's on his way back to Paris, and then he meets this army, a regiment sent to arrest him, and he talks to them and wins them over. He's still popular, and he does regain power, but by this time he doesn't have enough men really to take on Great Britain and all the countries of Europe who are, the British are determined to defeat him, and he is defeated at Waterloo in Belgium, and Waterloo becomes a famous slogan, a final defeat is someone's Waterloo. And then his last 6 years on St. Helena Island, where it shows him talking to these two girls, and he says, "Oh, who burned up Moscow?" And they said, "Well, the Russians did." And he says, "No, I did." And I don't. They probably made that up. So this was really, I would say, an anti-Napoleon movie. But so that's it. And anyway, if you really love if you know much about Napoleon Bonaparte, you probably won't. You really won't. I didn't like the movie at all. It was really unpleasant. But I think, like I said earlier, the good thing is that the movie shines light on one of the most important people in history, Napoleon Bonaparte, who really was dedicated to bringing good government to countries of Europe and, by extension, the whole world. Because at that time, the European countries really ruled the whole world. The British Empire was and he took on the British Empire, and French Empire, Spanish Empire was actually coming to the end, and Portuguese Empire, Belgian, Dutch. Actually, he had an effect on the Philippines, because he brought good government to Spain, and by extension, Spain decided, we should have good government in the Philippines, and Filipinos received a good governor come from Spain to the Philippines, and then they for a while they had good government under the Spanish, and then later things changed when the old elite monarchs took power again, and then they were back to sending bad governors to the Philippines. And So anyway, Filipinos were inspired to fight for their independence in large part because of that experience. So if you don't know anything about Napoleon, yeah, you can go to the movie if it sparks your interest in this man. I think he's a very important man, and I think that what he did, his mission continues today. I think it's interesting. He thought that he believed his hero was Julius Caesar, and I think I believe in reincarnation, and I think that he was the reincarnation of Caesar, Julius Caesar. It shows in the movie this a bust of Caesar behind him. In one scene when they're having the coup d'état, and he's taking political power, these politicians are fighting back, and he gets out of this building with all these angry politicians, and he says, "Oh, they tried to kill me." And I think that was connected to when Julius Caesar was murdered by senators in ancient Rome. And they called it when Brutus was among those, and maybe that was a similar situation where they were trying to kill Napoleon because he was a threat. He was this charismatic leader. So anyway, I do encourage you to read this book by Napoleon by Emil Ludwig, 1926, and I'm definitely interested in Napoleon: A Life by Andrew Roberts, 2015. And then, of course, there's this other one that I mentioned, Napoleon versus the Old and New World Orders by M.S. King, 2016. He's a fascinating man, and I think a great hero in history. And this movie does not do him credit. It really indicates that he's sort of this. It's just not a very positive movie. So, but anyway, I do believe Napoleon Bonaparte. The topic, his life is it's been 200 years, but I think his life is still very important. And the things he was trying to do and did and worked on, that his mission continues. Well, that concludes today's presentation. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.